oídos el verde de la selva y el canto del manglar. El corazón profundo de mi litoral, la alegría eterna, canto y libertad. Mis sueños con las mareas que vienen y van, son los anhelos de mi gente y su verdad.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patricia Cortez. I am Colombian ambassador to Ireland. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to this wonderful today's conversation, an online conversation on birdsong and salsa, a journey through the Pacific in Colombia. Yesterday was the celebration of the World Tourism Day, and today we are actually kind of celebrating and doing this event with two wonderful guests, the travel expert Eoghan Corry and Jose Pujana, and then I will introduce them. We really hope that the video that we all of us, we just saw works as a taster to really get engaged on the Colombia, with the Pacific coast in Colombia, with the flavors, with the nature that we are sure we will listen a lot from Eoghan. And actually, it's as well as we are in this moment, a good moment to have a conversation on the rebuilding on the tourism industry in Colombia and the recovery, and then next steps that we are taking seriously on that. Eoghan, as I mentioned, would share his experience. That was his first time in Colombia, but we are sure that will be just the first of many. His trip to Colombian Pacific coast that was in February this year. And he will again share all his experience on that. And Jose will talk more about the next step in Colombian government on that. So let me introduce the panelists. Eoghan Corry is an Irish journalist and author. Since 2002 until the beginning of 2020, he was editor of the Ireland's biggest circulation travel publication, Travel Extra. Now he's an editor of Air Travel magazine and a regular contributor to travel affairs for RTE. Eoghan was awarded a lifetime contribution to the industry by the Irish Travel Industry Awards in 2016. And he has received the Business Travel Journalist of the Year in London in 2015. He began his journalist career as a sports writer with the Irish Times and Sunday Tribune. And he was determined to continue on this career as a feature writer in 1985 and became features editor of the Irish Press in 1986 when he received the literary and travel sections of the paper. His Travel Extra article about the Colombia Pacific entitled Birdsong and Salsa, and thank you, Eoghan, because you allow us to use actually the title of your article for this event. He kindly, he speaks about the biodiversity, the salsa, the gastronomic experience, among the many other aspects of his visit to Colombia and Pacific coast. Welcome, Eoghan. And Jose Puyana, he's our second panelist today. He's the head of the ProColombia office. ProColombia is the Colombian agency that promotes tourism, investment, and exports. He's in charge of the office that covers UK, Ireland, and the Nordic countries. And he will be, as I mentioned, talking about on those Nordic steps. So welcome to you all. And we are glad with the participation of all the number of the participants today. And we welcome to this conversation. So please, Eoghan.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Ambassador. For those who don't know me, Eoghan Corry, I have spent a lot of time traveling very many countries, about 30 countries every year. It took a while for me to get to Colombia. I finally made it in March, just as the travel world was changing massively. So I got to do three things. I got to talk a little bit about my personal experience of going to the Pacific coast of Colombia. That's very important. That is the region I was in. I will also be talking about the emotional connection that Colombia makes with somebody when you go there. It's not something that can be translated by video or by image, but it's something that certainly happened. It's something I would anticipate people visiting Colombia will bring home part of Colombia with them, not just the photographs and the Instagrams that they do, but how it affects yourself and your relationship with the landscape. And I will be talking about what surprised me most about the connection with Colombia. I'll also be saying what is going to happen next, really, where we have got to place Colombia in the travel plans that we all are putting together in the world, in the new changed world and environment we're in, and why Colombia holds several advantages in that. The Pacific region, for those who are not familiar with it, is looking off to the west in Colombia. There are 6 regions, the Amazon rainforest, something that we'd all have images from our child, and the Andes, also very iconic in culture and pop culture and in travel culture. The Llanos, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which is a stupendous steppes and plains, and the internal region. But mostly Colombia, to our heads, is a Caribbean-facing country. We're quite familiar through the marketing done by cruise lines and the very strong presence that the city of Cartagena has historically and culturally with us. So I ended up choosing in advance of the Colombian travel market to go to the west-looking region, and it's quite a lot to get your head around. That Colombia is so far from the Atlantic coast, and so much of, even though there's huge countries between Colombia and the Atlantic coast, so much of it is almost associated with, obviously, the Caribbean side and the Atlantic side. When you swim in those little mountain rivers, even in the region that I was, many of them are going to start cascading off in the other direction and travel thousands of miles into the Atlantic. It's quite a concept for someone who swims, wild swims. I love to wild swim, that I'm swimming in water that's going to end up in the Amazon. That was, and then over a mountain crest, and you're dealing with classic Pacific coastline. You're dealing with the tropical plants, the mangroves, all the beautiful things that we associate with what the Pacific region. We have in Ireland a very very strong concept of Colombia for its birds. You really, really don't appreciate how birds dominate everything until you get there. I was having breakfast to Birdsong. I was having evening drinks to Birdsong. If there's a soundtrack to Colombia, it's that amazing Birdsong. 10% of the species found on Earth are found in Colombia. It has the widest variety of birds, the greatest range of birds that can be seen, and more importantly, listened to. The next thing that hit me over the head was Cali, the city of Cali. People will not travel the distance to Colombia for a city break. The city of Cali, very different from Bogota, big sprawling 10 million suburbs, Medellin, Cartagena. Cali comes with a soundtrack. There aren't many cities in the world that come where the name of the town conjures up a soundtrack, and the soundtrack is salsa. Salsa was invented in New York, but Cali owns salsa. The activities in Cali largely center around the dance schools, the museums, the performances. It's like one of those towns in the west of Ireland where everyone plays an instrument. It's like that sense you get in, for instance, New Orleans, where everywhere you step, there's music going in the background. Cali is a place for 2 or 3 days, and it's a place to learn to dance, or it's to try it out, or even watch those amazing athletic those salsa performance sessions where you don't really have to dance. All you have to do is sit and watch while the guys with the big sombreros throw their ladies into the air with heart-stopping regularity. When it comes to nature, normally a tourist goes somewhere and does touristy things, and nature forms the backdrop. What I found in the Pacific coast, and it was over a mountain pass, down the valley, into the port, onto a boat, and out to the, not so much the islands as the peninsulas, which are not reachable except by boat, and Lavaderos, places like that. What you find is nature is right at the heart of it. Everything else, all the tourism activity is the backdrop. Going through walks through the forest. Colombia, because it's so directly under the equator and so lush, there are 2 rainy seasons, and there's a lot of rain in between the 2 rainy seasons of the Pacific coast. When they were bringing us through those walks through the forest, it was done to cut back the undergrowth or the overgrowth that had appeared since the night before. So your guide is bringing you through places with a machete. Your boatman is bringing you through small river deltas where you have to duck. And then you come to the pools, the warm pools, where the river is flowing, and the small caves. You dive through the small caves with the lights swirling around you. It's something that in the competition, when Colombia looks up at what tourist destinations it's competing with, what Colombia can offer is a huge range in a very, very small area, a huge range of experiences, and most of all, the sense that you're in a privileged position to be so close to so much nature. That's what the Pacific coast brought to me. as I came back out of the Pacific coast and was flying home, the world was coming to an end. The reports in the papers were telling us that coronavirus was out of control and tourism was shutting down, access was shutting down. What the new world of travel that we face into is going to be a little bit different from what we've come from. But I can tell you my overwhelming sense of coming back from Colombia was that this is one of the locations where the world is moving away from big cruise ships, from long queues to 45-minute queues in the Orlando sun, to Pirates of the Caribbean, to crowded restaurants and cafes, big stadium events. Colombia sits rightfully in the heart of the new world, the new tourism world that we're going to be looking into. It's outdoor, it's close to nature, it's full of the birdsong that too many tourists have forgotten about or turned their back on in the past 20 or 30 years. And the good news is that I do see that access to Colombia is going to be restored. I think that from Ireland, I would recommend very heavily our access routes through Madrid, which bring you directly into Cali, rather than the London-Bogota flight. And in the new post-COVID world, it's one of the destinations I would be highly recommending as a first stop. Our travel is going to be probably more planned in the future, and the really important experiences that we got to see are going to be given a higher priority among all the revisits to places that we're already familiar with. I'd love to be part of a movement to bring tourism in Colombia to a higher level than it already is. On that slightly in convoluted point, I want to pass on to Jose from Pro Colombia, and hope I haven't overrun my time for those people who are looking at the clock for me.
Thank you, Eoghan, for that that amazing story about your trip to Cali and the Pacific. I have some questions that, of course, I would like to share with you after my presentation. I think you've really inspired us, and I love that phrase that you also included in your article, that Cali comes with a soundtrack, because that is what we feel we can convey about Colombia, and I would potentially just say Colombia comes with several soundtracks. And that is what we try to convey with our campaign that we have kept during these times, the Feel the Rhythm campaign, which is one of the videos that we watched at the beginning. The idea that Colombia is diversity is some 5 or 6 countries, as you mentioned as well, all clustered together, each with a different background, different history, and each of those backgrounds and histories comes with a rhythm that is very different, and salsa is definitely one of the rhythms that people would find in the Pacific, not the only one, and many different other rhythms in the rest of the country. So thanks for bringing that up. I think it's a wonderful way of explaining the country, and I will certainly cite you quote you when I use that phrase in the future, talking about Cali coming with a soundtrack. Thank you, and thank you, Ambassador, for having us in this space and organizing this event. I see there's been a lot of interest, and I'm really glad to be here. For those of you who don't know, ProColombia is the Colombian government's agency that promotes trade, investment, and tourism. So promoting tourism is very much part of our DNA, and we work tirelessly to support businesses both in Colombia and in Ireland, in this case, to connect, hopefully with the aim of increasing tourism towards Colombia. We want to see more Irish travelers looking into Colombia, traveling to Colombia, and visiting all of our regions and our diversity. Eoghan has been very clear in describing many of the characteristics of our country. So being biodiversity and birds, as shown behind me, one of the most important. I want to take just a few minutes to update everyone on the audience on what we've done and what we've focused on during these 6 months of pandemic, and the way in which we have worked tirelessly to adapt and to be able to offer the best possible scenario and infrastructure to any travelers considering Colombia. So during these but before doing that, I do want to highlight the good moment that Colombian tourism was facing right before the pandemic. I think we were reaching 2019 was the most successful year that we've had in terms of travelers into Colombia. The growth rate per year was significantly high still at that moment, more than 5 or 6%. So growing at higher rates than the rest of the region, attracting tourists from all around the world. And as I was saying, a very good moment. I just want to tell you a little bit about some of the acknowledgements that we had received up until that moment, which confirmed the good moment that we were facing. So Colombia during 2020 had been already chosen by the United States Tour Operators Association as a top destination, USTOA. We had in last year's version of the World Travel Awards, Colombia had been chosen as the leading destination in South America. And for this year's edition, we are nominated in 14 categories already, which includes ProColombia, South America's best tourism agency. Our tourism website, Colombia.travel, which is up here in my background, was chosen at the beginning of the year as the best tourism website in the world, which is not, it's not a simple acknowledgement. It's very important, very acknowledgeable, and we surpassed in terms of votes other very important websites as Condé Nast Traveler, for example, which is widely known. So those were some of the very important awards that we got. And in terms of birds, for the 4th time in a row, Colombia took the 1st place in the Global Big Day, an international bird counting competition held at the beginning in May every year. So these are very important acknowledgements that Colombia was getting right before the pandemic, and that sort of give us the energy and the impulse to keep working and to keep Colombia in the top of mind of many travelers around the world. What have we done during these months, and how have we prepared to face this juncture? So let me share with you just 3 very important actions that I think we've focused on and that are very important as a general context in regards to our tourism sector. One of which was adapting to change. The first one was adapting to change. At the beginning, we started to say, we used this phrase in Spanish, but we said, let's use this moment to prepare ourselves and to get ready for whatever comes afterwards. In Spanish, we said, we're going from del aislamiento al alistamiento, using the lockdown to get ready to be able to offer the best possible tourism. And we did this through a very, very deep and rigorous process of training all of the actors in the tourism industry through what we called La Ruta Exportadora, and a very, very detailed process of training to make everyone ready for whatever came afterwards. The second very important aspect of what we've done in preparing ourselves was facilitating air travel connectivity, which is something that I'll mention in a bit as well. But one of the very important aspects that we were talking about right before starting was the way in which we promoted the air travel connectivity by reducing sales tax on tickets in Colombia from 19% to 5%, which is something that has helped the industry significantly to begin initially with domestic flights back in July, and now with international flights this September. And the third very important aspect of the way in which we prepared ourselves to get ready was making sure that we had everything to show travelers that they could trust Colombia and that they could travel to Colombia confidently, knowing that things were under control. And not under control just in terms of the pandemic, but in terms of the protocols and in terms of biosecurity, showing that the industry had adapted to the reality. And one of the tools that we used to do so was the creation of a tourism biosecurity certification called Certified Check-in, which is the first certification of this sort created in Latin America. And in our case, had the support of not just the UN WTO, but also the World Travel Tourism Council, the WTTC, both of which have supported this effort and make sure that we can show any traveler that either a hotel, a restaurant, or an airline are getting ready to offer them the best possible quality and the best possible protocols in terms of biosecurity. This having said, as the ambassador was saying at the beginning, we have worked very hard on reopening again. And reopening again has been not only getting ready to offer infrastructure, but also the fundamental step to open up airports. This happened some 10 days ago. We received already the first international flight after the lockdown, which was on the 19th of September. A flight from Fort Lauderdale arrived in Cartagena. At the moment, we have already 4 airports, one of which is Cali, that Eoghan mentioned, but also Medellin, Bogota, and Cartagena, again, are ready to receive international flights. Of course, it depends on the airlines, on when they will start services to Colombia. We are, of course, talking to them and hopefully getting ready to have all of these routes up and ready very, very soon. One very important aspect that I would like to raise is the way in which our airports are getting ready to receive tourists. El Dorado, which is the airport in Bogota, inaugurated a COVID-19 test center facility last week on the 23rd of September. Passengers can now do their test at the airport upon arrival or before leaving, and the tests can take from 2 to 24 hours, depending on of course, certain conditions. The price of the test, of course, will depend on the insurance of each traveler, but what we can assure is that the lab is working 7 days a week, almost 24 hours. It's from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., which gives confidence to tourists that if they show up to the airport, they'll be able to get a test within those the time frame. It is worth mentioning, and this is just to start to close, that there are, of course, new requirements for tourists, and I would like to convey some of those important requirements that need to be met. So passengers traveling to Colombia now will have to present a negative PCR test. So this test has to be taken within or a maximum of 94 hours before traveling. So travelers will have some days before traveling to show this test. If they have the test, of course, they can arrive in Colombia without self-isolating and enjoy their time in our country. To ensure a swift migration process, travelers that travel to Colombia will have to fill in some of their details in our Migration Authority website. Nothing too detailed, but of course, giving us information about their arrival, where they'll be staying, some of their contact details, and this will have to be done between 24 and 1 hour, 24 hours and 1 hour before their flight. Passengers will need to download an app. It's called the Corry app, which is an app developed in Colombia, where they will have to report any symptoms if they get some, and of course using face coverings at all times, and a constant wash of hands will be important for them to continue working under and guaranteeing the best biosecurity conditions for everyone. So these are some of the conditions and the protocols that have been set in place to make travelers confident that they can go to Colombia at any point. And hopefully, again, connectivity will allow us to take travelers from Europe very, very soon in the best possible conditions in terms of biosecurity. Thank you very much, Ambassador. That was some of the topics that I wanted to share. And again, Eoghan, thank you so much for that wonderful story about your trip to the Pacific. It was really inspiring.
Culture.
Thank you, Jose. I think you mentioned at some point that you got some questions for Eoghan about his experience. Perhaps it would be good, like, before we open the floor for the audience to listen to Eoghan's response on your questions.
Yes, Ambassador, I certainly do, and thank you very much. I think one of the things I usually ask to people who travel to Colombia and have come back and that they've wanted to share their story with us is a little bit about your expectations before going there. So you mentioned you've probably visited tens or hundreds of countries already. You've certainly had heard about Colombia before. What was your expectation before going there, and how did we react and how did we deliver on those expectations after your trip?
The big question when you go to somewhere like Colombia, you've read a lot about it. You know there's going to be this sort of amazing bird song and these variety of birds. How far out of the city do you have to go to get it? How accessible is it? When you go to a lot of countries, the marketing just doesn't add up. The little bits in between, they forget to tell you this is a 3-hour trek up a mountain before you can actually experience it firsthand. I woke up in my hotel in Cali the first day and I had birds. They weren't actually in the room, but they might as well have been. They were outside the window and they were shouting at me to get out of bed and see this amazing country. The sense you're in this city, it's a very hilly city. The colors of the streets are amazing. The houses have been painted in these demonstrative colors. There are faces painted on gable walls. It's a city like, I mentioned the fact that it has a soundtrack, but it's a city expressing itself. And you sometimes wonder when you travel a lot and you meet a lot of overstated product or towns that look the same, what is it that's special and different about a place that you land? It always comes back. I mean, architecture is architecture, nature is nature. The tourism experience is largely about the people. And when you have Cali dropped as it is into a mountainy area with this amazing river running through it and all of this birdsong around it, it's the expression of the people. The fact that people decided to react to this in expressing themselves in the way that they did. It's expressed in the faces of the people, in the interactions on the street, in the friendliness. It's expressed in the painting of the colors, those gay colors, the gable walls. And then you go to the dance school and then you go to the performance and you see how people are expressing themselves, people reacting to the landscape and the beautiful situation that they have been placed in. And that was what was different between, that's the expectation was maybe, you know, we're going to go to a place that's very beautiful and we're going to see cities and we're going to see a street with McDonald's at the end of it and United Colors of Benetton at the other. But what I met was, you know, it was a reaction, almost like a chemical reaction between the people who live in this beautiful place and the landscape around them. That was continued then as I went out to the coast. And when I went out to, that was brought to the little village with the indigenous people, the people who've been there for tens of thousands of years, and how they related to their surroundings and the different, the food, for instance, the drink, unusual drink and unusual food, and homogenized world where we're all drinking the same product and eating the same sort of product. You had not just a couple of local indigenous dishes or a couple of local indigenous drinks that would, you know, be served up to tourists. You had dozens of them, perhaps hundreds of them, maybe thousands of them. We didn't get the time to explore. I remember reading when I was a very young boy. I come from Ireland. I'm a great lover of potatoes. I remember reading when I was a very young boy some account by one of the early travelers to South America way, way back, saying that the richness and the variety of the diet of the average person in pre-Columbian South America was way ahead of what people ate and enjoyed in Europe at that same time. And when you go there and you see a cuisine which is unfamiliar to those of us who travel the world and eat in these fine restaurants who all have the same type of menu and the same type of reception staff and the same type of tablecloth, and you meet food as it was, or food as it was celebrated in the culture of pre-Columbian American. It's been passed. So much of what we eat nowadays, including the potatoes that I love, came from South America. But to go back and visit it in its homeland was also something that brought it beyond the expectations. And I had high expectations, not that I didn't have high expectations, but brought it beyond those expectations. If I was to sum it up in one line, it's like getting so much of what South America and Colombia has exported to European culture in terms of music, in terms of food, in terms of way of life and outlook on life, and seeing it in somebody's home. It was like Colombia took me and brought me into their kitchen and their living room and celebrated everything that they're good at with me. And that's something that you don't get in all the countries that you trek to in the homogenized world, with a shared, almost banal, almost blended tourism culture, because the average tourist of the cruise ship and the tourist of the coach trip doesn't really like something that's that different from what they got, what they've left behind. But that's what Colombia brings you into their living room to celebrate with you. That's something very special. I hope they can keep it as the time evolves and as they are exposed to very large tourist numbers. But it's something very, very special that Colombia has and should keep.
Wonderful, Owen, and thank you very much. And I think those are very, very powerful ideas and very powerful reflections of your trip to Colombia. If I may, again, going back to the idea of Cali being a soundtrack or coming with a soundtrack. What was your, and I think it's important to mention that our Feel the Rhythm campaign is based upon the idea that you can create these sorts of connections with travelers through music. As you can also with gastronomy and with food, you can create a certain link. And I think our campaign was at the beginning very successful because it used music and certain rhythms to connect with travelers. Was your experience with salsa there, was it a good tool, or did it allow you to connect better with the country, to understand its culture better, to understand its people better?
One word, it was a disaster. My salsa failed. It was a ritual self-humiliation. I participated in the dance lesson, and then I sat back and I started taking photographs, which is the reason I became a sports writer. I was so bad at sport, I started writing about it. But as I watched the faces of these Europeans and some Americans who'd never danced before being drawn into it, I did get a sense of what Cali does. Some countries, you can go to Verona and go to see a beautiful opera. You're not going to be brought on the stage to ask to sing Madame Butterfly aria at the end of it. What Cali does, you don't have to participate. I'm a classic example that you don't have to participate in it. What Cali says is, this is our culture. And it's high, it's high culture. It's not just a folk music tradition that you come across in some countries. It's very high culture. The performances are of the highest standard that you're going to come across. Some people looking in will remember the Cali dancers on stage at Super Bowl with Jennifer Lopez. It's high culture. It's the sort of thing that you would travel around the world to watch and sit in the audience and drop your jaw at this amazing performance. But also what Cali does is at the end of it, it taps you on the shoulder and says, you want to join in? You don't have to be great. You don't have to be a sort of a champion Irish dancer and come on the stage at Riverdance. You can actually do your rudimentary salsa, and we will join you and celebrate with you. We went to one of the shows. It's, you know, blatantly a tourist show, quite clearly a tourist show, and there were all these locals coming for their night out. That doesn't really happen. When you go to tourist destinations, you don't go to see the tourist show and have all these locals just there for their night out. And they were joining in the dance, and the professional dancers dressed with these over-the-top Colombian costumes were asking these shy tourist women out to dance. And then the locals who had just come out for the night were giving it socks. You know, I remember, you just look into people's faces, you see the middle-aged couple who probably do this every week, coming out and reliving, you know, the joy of their first salsa dance together. And you get, I said in the last, my last little rambling comment about food and that, but you do get the sense that these are people who have this culture dripping out of them, and they want to bring you in to their living room to share it with you. And it applies to the dance. There are museums, there are places you can go. I knew nothing about salsa in advance. There are places you can go where the heroes of salsa are feted. Their pictures and posters are on the wall. There's an amazing sculpture in Cali itself, which is done to look like the sound of one of the famous local music tracks. But what you get is, this is what we do. We're very, very good at it. And we want you not just to listen, but we want you actually to join in as well. And as I said, flying back, you do bring part of Colombia with you. You do feel your life has been altered by the connection with Colombia. That is, you know, what good tourism is. That's what successful tourism is around the world. And it's something that people with huge budgets and cruise lines and with theme parks and everyone will tell you they can do. You know, they'll change your life and fill you with the memories forever. When it's done authentically and when it's done for real, it's something that I would challenge anyone to find a superior life-changing experience than you would out of that tourist engagement with Colombia.
Thank you. Ambassador, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Over to you.
Yeah, it's really inspirational to listen to you, and it's really great. We have actually a number of questions from the audience. Let's take 3 of them. If actually we have someone from Cali. It says that in Cali we have more than 100 salsa schools, orchestras, artisans, shoemakers, shows, gastronomy, and melomania as a great tourist product that requires reaching the correct market. What do you think? I think this question might be for both of you. What do you think is the most suitable distribution channel for cultural tourism?
Do you want me to come in there?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. This is a really interesting question. Cultural tourism, everybody talks about it. Nobody really believes it can deliver money. It can deliver a high spend customer. It can deliver people who are of the right demographic, but it doesn't deliver the big spend that mass tourism does. I think that because it takes, one of the things is it takes so long to assemble, or it ends up with being a big stadium product like the Louvre in Paris, or one of the Mayan temples in Mexico. But what you can actually, what Cali has shown the world and what Cali can do is by that, the scale of the cultural product that's on offer, those 100 schools, I don't doubt it for a second, because everywhere I turned, there was something else being advertised as a salsa product. If you have that scale and it's not manufactured, and authenticity, like in the age of Instagram and TripAdvisor, authenticity is what we all miss. Authenticity is what we're all chasing. Authenticity is the hardest thing to find. And Cali can deliver that cultural tourism on that scale I think that it's not going to be Cartagena and the cruise ships and the beaches of the Caribbean. But it's going to be not far behind it. It's going to be close, because when your experience of embracing the cultural product, the cultural offering of Cali, a city in Colombia, nobody's going to say it's going to compete with the rainforest or the birds or anything like that. But when you arrive in the city and you're embracing a cultural product on that scale, that's as authentic as you're going to get in that great quest for authenticity. It can deliver. It's the case that shows that cultural tourism isn't a minority pursuit, isn't something that people throw in for one night on a cruise ship tour, the trip to the opera or whatever. It's something that can be the center of a stay in a particular region, which Pacifico would be.
Yeah, I guess very, very, very interesting. And of course, it's part of the advice on that we are working as well on this strategy. I don't know, Jose, do you want to add something, or perhaps I move to the next question?
Yes, I think we can move to the next one.
And here is that you traveled back, this is for Eoghan, you traveled back from Colombia just before any cases of COVID were confirmed in the country. What was your sensation about biosafety in those initial moments? Did the information available to you as visitor make you feel at ease? That's for you, Eoghan.
I was perfectly at ease. The actual direction coronavirus was traveling was the opposite direction. We were worried at that stage, particularly about China. And I went through Frankfurt Airport and I saw particularly the Asians wearing masks. I have very great faith in air travel. I think the HEPA filters on board aircraft, which make them as safe as a theater, an operating theater in a hospital, makes one safe, even on a prolonged air journey. I did sense the aviation leg is going to be the safest part of your post-COVID, your coronavirus travel. The places that you run into danger are in the airports, and sometimes the airport hygiene, security trays, all of that. That's where the big questions would arise. But it was so early in the cycle, I wasn't particularly concerned. I also have, in my career as a travel writer, been in Mexico when the H1N1 outbreak occurred in 2009 and when the international flights were being cancelled. I was in Africa for quite a period when the Ebola crisis was looking like running out of control out of the 3 countries. So while I'm not careless about safety, I'm also was always conscious that sometimes the overstating of the danger can lead to a great deal of concern and panic among passengers, which is probably not warranted. So as I returned home, I did expect coronavirus to be something like H1N1. It would, cause a lot of concern and then disappear into a cycle like the seasonal flu. What's happened since has changed everything's about that. But to answer the question, Colombia was not going to be an epicenter of it. I came back went on national radio in Ireland and talked about my concern that coronavirus would be more of a focus than the other diseases and the other concerns which the indigenous people of Colombia would suffer from. And I would not like to see national budgets being diverted away from that. Everything has changed since then. Coronavirus has become quite a bigger monster than I would have and anyone else would have hoped it had become. And would I feel safe about going back to Colombia and flying under the current conditions? Absolutely. Because what we've seen is the aviation industry embracing the monster, the airports sitting down and saying, we've got to handle social distancing, hygiene, hand washing, sanitizing. We've seen all step by step put into place. Safety is what the aviation industry does. That's right through airports and the aircraft and the aircraft runners, they actually do this because they fly internationally to places that have high incidence of different diseases. They have to watch out for Zika and dengue fever and all of these things all the time. So I feel in safe hands when I'm traveling. And then after that, it's up to good sense, doing what you're told when you land in a country, following the advice that Jose has set out, that is being put into place by the Colombian. And in that environment, this is really important. Tourists tend not to get to contract the terrible diseases. They tend not to pick up the coronavirus. The international channels of transport have not been where those outbreaks that are haunting every country in Europe at the moment have been found. International travel ain't where the problem is going to be, and it is possible to keep the links open, keep the airports open, keep the borders open, and travel internationally and be safe in the new post-coronavirus world that we're in, because a lot of people have worked very, very hard to make it safe for us.
Yeah, great to listen that from an expert on traveling. And I guess the last question perhaps, and it's from the Pacific is also known for whale watching. Did you hear about that? Have you experienced that somewhere else?
I have been on many, many whale watching trips. I wasn't one on the Pacific. And what whale watching is huge. It's a huge part of international tourism, and it is part of the Pacifico offering. I don't tend to gravitate towards it because I've done quite a bit of it in wonderful whale watching locations, and some whale watching locations where we didn't see any whale. It's one of those things that when you've done it a few times, it homogenizes, to use that horrible word, the destination that you're going to. If I was to even go back in my memory, which ones were done in Massachusetts, which one were done in Alaska, which were done in South Africa, which were done in Australia, it's something that isn't unique to Colombia. And while I would recommend it highly as an experience for someone who hasn't been whale watching before, I think that when you're probably over-traveled, you tend to look for what's different and what's new in a location that you go. Didn't experience the whale watching, so cannot comment on it, but quite a lot of the people I was mixing with said it ranks with the best in the world.
Okay, so we still have a question for another, time for another question. I think at some point you mentioned, but I think it was before the event, like Irish tourists are resilient to travel again. What could give an extra push for people to book their holiday? I think a little bit of what you say before may answer that, but that's a very strict question on that.
Does Jose want to come in, or do you want me?
The question is like regarding how the Irish tourists are resilient to travel, what could give an extra push for people to book their holiday? Of course, Irish people to book their holiday.
My first to explain, the Irish were, when 9/11 happened and all the European markets were slow to recover, the Irish were back very quickly. Ash Cloud, the Irish were back when there was conflict. I mean, Colombia would have a reputation 20 years ago for being an unsafe destination. It's certainly not manifest there now, but the Irish would disregard what they see in Hollywood movies as having any relevance to the real experience. And when there's political problems, the Irish are very, very close, very, very quick to return. To answer your question about the push, everything depends on access. Everything depends on having the airline seats and the beds. South America hasn't been well served by access. The aviation market has been very heavily regulated. It made flights to South America expensive in comparison with the sort of access we had to Europe and to the rest of Europe, North America, and to Asia, and less so to Africa. So what could happen now is that in the bid by the different airlines to ensure that they come through this crisis, that we will have measured, ordered seat sales and price incentives to break down the very high cost of air access and reduce it to the sort of levels that Irish people can get to Thailand for, to give an example. The distance is not a problem. The connectivity, the fact you have to go through Madrid ain't a big problem. Irish people are very resilient on that. What does bring it over the line and seal the deal for them will be, is this considerably more expensive than similar exotic, because Colombia is exotic, similar exotic destinations that you're competing with. And they would include some of the islands of the Indian Ocean and what's available in Asia. I think that the post-COVID-19 world could see Colombia, with the proper alliances within the travel trade and people who would get involved in promoting your individual itineraries, getting the introduction over the places like Cartagena over, but also bringing the seasoned traveler into the nature, the wild nature areas that I saw. All of that is there to play for, possibly, and this is a big leap, but they're possibly there in a way they weren't there before COVID-19 struck, because the new set of circumstances and the new set of challenges facing the travel industry will mean that overcoming the 2 or 3 obstacles that were there preventing Colombia becoming a first rank, and I'm not talking by quality of product, but by quality by stage of visitor numbers, to be a first rank destination. All those obstacles can be removed. You could be in the sort of area where the Caribbean countries that we like to go to, Dominican Republic and Cuba and Mexico are, very, very easily, if there was a little bit of awareness and a little bit of a push, particularly on those access price issues.
All right, thank you, Eoghan. Well, we have reached the end, and thank to our guests, thank Eoghan, thank Jose. It's been really, really great to hear from both, from the experience of Eoghan when he went to Colombia, to the Pacific, and as well on, our planning, our next steps in the future, to recover this tourism and what it means in terms for all of us, for the people, for the connection. Thanks to all the attendees for your time, for your interesting questions. And we really hope to see you soon, hopefully in Colombia, that you have Colombia in your plans for the next very, very close future. And stay safe, and I invite you to see a last video to close these sessions. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Eoghan, for that.
Thank you.